welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. Ange Postecoglou is leaving Celtic. I'm your host Jamie, and I'm joined by Martin.
Yes.
And Stephen.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
It is the one thing we didn't want to happen, Martin Melly. We knew the rumours were everywhere. I made my best case to Ange, my pledge to Ange, and this is my apology to 20 Minute Tims viewers and listeners. It obviously wasn't good enough. I hope that I'd put my heart and soul on the line there. But as we sit and record this, it's not official. Celtic haven't released the statement, but he's as good as gone to Spurs, 2-year deal with an option. It's a bit of a shocker, Melly.
Disappointed. Haven't slept for days. That's a harsh one. I think since the flagship last week, things have really ramped up and it got to sort of fever pitch over the weekend. Celtic went out and done the treble, brilliant, but you just had that sense that this was the end of the road here. It's coming to light today that it's pretty much a done deal as well. Disappointed, but kind of knew it was coming, but it still hurts, man.
Aye, very similar sentiments, to be honest. I'm very disappointed. It's a sad day as far as I'm concerned because a hugely popular manager has now left us. He's gone out on a high is the only thing, right? I suppose if there's anything we ask of people, it's to go out and leave Celtic in a good position, leave them in a strong position, because ultimately all managers will leave, whether they leave well or whether they're sacked because they're not good enough. They will leave eventually. The best we can hope for is that Celtic are in a good position to pick up and move on and get a replacement in and develop on it with very, very little interruption. Now, that's not his responsibility, that's the club's responsibility, so it's basically over to them. But yeah, there's no getting away from it. I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised. I'd basically resigned myself to it. We had a lengthy discussion just last week about the links to Spurs. I'd basically resigned myself to it happening one way or another. Feels a bit of a blow that it came so shortly after the high of winning the treble. 48, 72 hours on from that, and it's all over. So I know it hasn't been officially confirmed. By the time this comes out, it may have.
For the purposes of everyone watching and listening, we're going to be talking throughout the podcast as if it's been confirmed. There's no point.
The BBC have reported that it is a done deal. He has agreed to the terms offered to him by Spurs. So Celtic have been basically keeping their mouths shut about it the entire time.
He was really, really pressed before the game.
Yeah.
The press coverage started to ramp up. He was really pressed before the game about whether or not he was going to Spurs. And, I knew it was a long shot that he turned Spurs down. You're almost asking for a gesture of goodwill not to turn Spurs down, or you're hoping that Spurs fluff their offer a wee bit. You're hoping that Spurs lowball them. Celtic can get their remark. I still do believe that there's things you can offer Celtic as a manager that would tempt a certain manager at a certain point in his career not to join an English Premier League club. But at the end of the day, you just need to face facts that it was always going to be a difficult one to turn down. The writing was on the wall for me, even maybe last week when I recorded the flagship, because there's all this talk about what managers can and can't say, right? But it would have been the easiest thing in the world to say he's not going to Spurs. And he said he was dancing on the head of a pin, trying desperately not to say I'm going to Spurs. He was saying absolutely everything other than I'm staying at Celtic and I'm going to Spurs. They were asking him and they were throwing volleys and backhanders and spins and everything at him, and he's like a game of dodgeball, just trying to avoid answering.
Tennis analogies, is it now?
Was that tennis? Or was it?
You move on pretty quick to me.
I was trying cricket. And no sport. There was a particular interview in the Herald where he was just pressed. They just weren't letting him weasel out of answering this question. Are you going to Spurs? And he managed it. He managed to escape the interview without admitting either way. But at the same time, the easiest thing in the world would be just to say I'm not going. So at that point, the guy's off. This is what football managers say when they are leaving their current club. That is basically it. Yeah. And it is early. There are positives and negatives to this, as there are with everything. I think from the Celtic continuity, Celtic Football Club point of view, Celtic fan point of view, the positives are he left the club in a good state, as you've said.
Yeah.
Treble winners, top of the league, strong squad, depending on how many of those boys stay or go in the summer, because
they're valuable though. If they do go, then Celtic are in a good position.
Yeah, that's true. Admittedly, it was Celtic that worked in tandem with Ange to make sure that happened and get these guys on long deals. But you're right, we've got a valuable squad. Players always kind of, when managers move on, sometimes players use that as an opportunity to move on. I don't think we should expect much different for Celtic. I think directly into the Champions League, a huge one.
Yeah.
Because of Ange's work last year and the work of the board, the work of everyone else at the club, very strong financially. I was having a wee think back about which manager has came into the club with the club being in as strong a position as this, and
Nobody.
I don't think in my lifetime there has been an opportunity for a manager to come in with Celtic being in such a strong position. I think the timing, as much as we all don't like the fact that he's gone, I think the fact that he's gone now is really good, because it gives Celtic the time they need. Everyone's away on holiday. There's nothing happening at Celtic for at least a fortnight. Now, for my nerves, I would prefer Celtic didn't take a fortnight to appoint their next manager. But the fact that he's done the thing and it's early doors and it's done and gone, and it looks as if he'll be gone before the season officially ends or before everyone goes on holiday, I think is a good thing for Celtic. And I think it gives us a really good opportunity to move on.
Yeah, I think any manager coming in right now, it's set up for them. The Celtic have got a strong squad, and there hasn't been, in my lifetime anyway, somebody coming in. Usually when a manager goes, it's because their time's up, they've been sacked, or it's sort of come to the end of the road, hasn't it? Like Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, you're just like, this is it's done here. But with this,
it's a binary thing, isn't it? There's no other way for a football manager to go. You either leave on a high or get sacked on a low. It's really no other option.
Yeah.
There is a rare third option. That's what I wanted from well, it's not really a third option because it's leaving on a high. I wanted Ange just to give us a bit more time. But there is no other way this ends for anybody. I can't even think of or you retire.
Yeah,
but that's the same thing.
Sorry to jump in. There's so much chat about the ideal time to leave a club. The best way to do it, and it is never. Mel, you've said time and again recently in the build up to this about how there are no fairy tales. There's no walking off into the sunset where you can please all of the people all of the time. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I'm looking at managers in my lifetime, and I can't think of any that left under the ideal circumstances. Really, the only comparison would be Neil Lennon. First time around, he left with Celtic as champions. Decided he couldn't really take them any further because of circumstances. And Ronnie Dyer came in.
Arguably, Neil Lennon left for the same reasons as Postecoglou's leaving. He wanted a crack at England.
Yeah,
ended up taking the wrong job down in Bolton. But I mean, that is basically why he left.
But I find it unfair to hold anyone to a standard that effectively doesn't really exist. This mystical manager who left at the right time. If you do this, you can leave a legend. You can leave other blessings. That doesn't happen.
I think the thing with Ange, I'm only speaking for myself here, right? But the thing with Ange and me, the reason I wanted another year, and I think some people think along the same lines as me, is we think it's too soon for Ange to go. And I don't know how to say this without being patronising, but I think people thought, I think there's an element of, maybe not me, but I think there's an element of, we sort of found you, Ange. We gave you this platform from which you are performing well. And yes, you've won a double last year and a treble, but what we really want from you, Ange, is to see you have a proper crack at the Champions League. Now, he did have a crack at the Champions League. That was his first season at it, last season. And we kind of know that it didn't go our way. I think people just wanted that from Ange. And you're right. That it could have all went. Rangers could go out, spend 50 million quid in the summer, nearly bankrupt themselves, with consequences beyond what we know, but end up winning the league, and then everyone's like, I should have left on a high last year. It's just how fickle football fans are, But
you could have had a crack at the Champions League and then lost the league, and at the end of the season, we're like, maybe it's time to move on from him. So
and like you're saying, he's like, well, I'm glad I stayed. I'm glad I hung about. But I think from my point of view, I just thought about Ange. I just really like this manager. I think he's a really strong manager. But what undercuts it all is Spurs is the biggest managerial job anyone has ever been offered in this country since Fergie joined Man U, and were Man U even as in strong a position as Spurs were when Fergie joined them, or did he turn them into Manchester United? He turned them into Man United. So you could be talking about almost the biggest managerial offer any manager's ever had in terms of stature, in terms of top end Premier League club, definitely in terms of money, access to. It's everything really.
Yeah, and look, Brendan Rodgers was here with a bigger reputation, more success, and yet didn't get offered as good a job as this. Spurs are a top 6 club. Leicester,
I will caveat that slightly by saying Leicester won the league a couple of years prior. Was it the year before or a year and a half prior? And they paid a lot of money to get Brendan. When he went to England, was it not reported that he was like the third highest paid manager
I could believe it,
in the league or something like that? So you're right, it wasn't as good a job in terms of stature of club, but he was getting top 4 money because Leicester wanted to get back up there.
Yeah, but the and that's true. But the point is, like,
Brendan does love money. I've
loves a pound note.
what gives you that
I've heard
impression?
that Brendan Rodgers is fond of the old, you know.
Cabbage, yeah. But I think with Ange, it's look, he's came here, he's been absolutely brilliant. 5 trophies out of 6. He's whatever you want to do for it. For me personally, he's probably my favourite manager at Celtic. Martin O'Neill and him, it'll be up there because he gave us something that I didn't think was possible at the time. And we can go into that later, but for him to move on, I kind of need to remember, look, this is his job, this is his career. We'll be looking at it as like, I might never get this opportunity again. And I mean that in the fact that, yes, he grew up watching football with his dad. He watched the Premier League.
Yeah.
For him, his aspirations was probably always been to get there. And then when he gets offered this job and thinks, maybe in a year's time I'll get offered something similar, I just don't see it. What I mean, also, just to take it on a wee bit further, if Ange Postecoglou stays at Celtic next season, does okay in a Champions League group, maybe gets third, if probably the best Celtic can hope for, does he get offered a job as good as this? Or does his way of getting into the top clubs in England, going to Spurs, being a success, and then getting offered those jobs? I think it's going to Spurs and doing that.
I mean, if you're a success, if it's a success at Spurs, if Ange goes to Spurs and pulls off what he's managed to pull off at Celtic, and there's no reason to think the guy won't because he's such a talented manager. The only thing he would maybe take into consideration is the way Spurs run themselves, and they're probably changing that a wee bit. That it is not out of the question to suggest that this guy, if he goes to Spurs, does really well. He could have a career like Henrik Larsson. Towards the end of his career, he could find himself pitching up at Barcelona or Real Madrid or some huge club if he does well with Spurs. You know, that's what's on offer now.
I was just about to say there, we're talking about a guy now who has gone from Japan to potentially moving on from Spurs within 4 years at the age of the late 50s. That's incredible, really. Regardless of your feelings on this move, zooming out as a neutral, I know it's impossible for us to do that, but I'm trying to look at it as a neutral. What a story that is. That's like Jamie Vardy stuff, really.
I think also, because I think I can see myself playing a lot of Dick Advocat on this side of it. The Dick Advocat side of that is, and the gamble for Ange here is, he doesn't have the cash of a Conte, a Mourinho, a Pochettino. If he starts at Spurs the way he starts at Celtic, fans are not going to look at this guy and go, oh, but it's Conte, you know, he's done it before, you need to give him a chance. They're going to say, we had our doubts about this guy and we're mid-table by Christmas. He's not going to have that cachet in the bank.
He knows the risks, though.
I know, I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm just saying it's...
I think as fans, we hold on to that as a deterrent for managers to move on. Stay here, because see, if you leave, you'll probably get sacked somewhere else. There's a lot of that goes on, but you'll not get the time there. They know this. The managers know this. I think in the UK, there's a tendency to look upon sacking a manager as an outright travesty. You never want to see a man lose his job and all that, right? I think there's a wee bit too much hand-wringing about it. In Italy, Spain, Germany, they just move about all the time with very little reputational damage. See if it's not working out in Italy, they just sack them, get somebody else in.
Bring them back later on.
Bring that guy back 8 times in his career. They just move about and it's fine. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Ange, but the managers are aware. Like, he's been in the game for nearly 30 years now. He's failed before.
I just think you can't criticise football fans for being emotional and passionate about their manager. And, you know, if you want to be hypercritical, there was an element of, with Ange, there is a huge part of the package of Ange is the emotional attachment to the guy.
Yeah.
And that's part of brand Ange, right? That's a part of what you get when you come along with Ange Postecoglou. We've got, no exaggeration to say, hundreds of people from Australia, maybe more, that watch this, and even some people that take part in our Discord purely because Ange, because of the guy Ange is. You buy into that with Ange. So the flip side of that is you're going to leave a lot of people disappointed when you go, and I think what didn't sting me a wee bit, but one thing that sort of caught my attention a wee bit was in the cup final. Ange said, and he's right to say it, and, you know, not everyone was on board with Ange when he joined. That's 100% true. I think I'm on record of saying some stuff immediately when Ange first joined that, you know, I didn't think he was the man for the job. Quickly changed my mind, did a bit of research, and as things progressed, and I was very tough on Ange in the early days. And, you know, nobody really cares what I think. I'm just a podcaster, but I thought it was my job as a fan to be tough on Ange. I remember sitting on these podcasts going, I don't care. He needs to find a way to win these games, because that's my job as a fan, is to be tough on Ange. And Ange said in a press conference after the game, he I was a joke when I joined. He was settling scores with the press, and that's when you knew he was off. He says, I was a joke when I joined here, and these fans had my back, and part of the reason I'm only in a job today is because of the fans. And I thought, exactly, that's why people are pissed off. This isn't a Brendan Rodgers who can stand on his own back, and if the fans fall out with him a wee bit, he can get... Ange, in those early days, relied on the support of the fans to get him through and get him into the Celtic job, and we had his back, and a lot of people had his back. That's why I think we're seeing people pissed off in a way that you might not expect. See if this was any other manager like Ronnie Dial or whoever just left, or any other manager. For a start, he's not comparable to Brendan Rodgers. I've seen a lot of people compare him to Brendan Rodgers. That's the prevailing thing online, is he's left just like Brendan did. Completely different. Brendan snuck out in the middle of the night, tried to take the whole backroom staff. We had a game a couple of days later. Could not be more different. Could not be more different. But I can understand why people are disappointed with Ange, because part of the package was this emotional buy-in.
Yeah. But to Dick Advocate, your Dick Advocate. I'll be
double dicking,
I'll be Rick Advocate here. Has he not repaid that though? Like, to what extent does he have to repay that loyalty from the fans? He could easily turn around and say, and he would never do this in a million years because it's not his job, it's not his place to do so. I've just re-established the total dominance of Scottish football for you. I've left on a treble. What more? Do you want blood from me?
No,
I'm saying that's a trade-off though.
No, I know.
He backed us. Oh, sorry, we backed him, and he repaid that. Where does it end?
Well,
I appreciate that people are well within their rights to be pissed off about it, but I don't think that's a reasonable trade-off to say you must stay forever and ever and ever and ever.
We've used Dick, we've used Rick. Let
Chick
enter Chick Advocate into this debate. Right, we're going to run out of names here. But Chick Advocate would say, yeah, but what we really want from you, what a show of loyalty is knocking back a job. Now, if you had another advocate brother, he would come and say, you don't know how many jobs Ange's not back?
Nick
Advocate comes in, sticks his head through the went, you don't know if Ange's not back any jobs.
Yeah.
You don't know how many people have put the feelers out to Ange Postecoglou, because it's not out with the question to think that there's no way Spurs are the first people that have ever sounded out Ange at Celtic.
No. He's been linked with everything going. Crystal Palace, Brighton, Brentford, all season.
He could have told all of them, no, I've got a job to do here at Celtic. Come and talk to me in the summer. And they went, we're not waiting for you. So there's machinations and there's all sorts going on. But I think one thing's clear to me anyway, that this Spurs didn't just happen upon Ange in the last week or two. I think conversations have been taking place maybe for a while here. But be fair to Ange Melly, he says, my focus is on the cup final. And there is not... I saw somebody, comment on us today saying, Ange said... Now, I don't want to make this podcast all about what people are saying online, but it was a journalist that said, Ange said he was concentrating on the cup final. That doesn't look like it's quite turned out to be the case. But I thought it is. He's done exactly what he said he would do. He obviously had people working in the background, but we won the treble. His whole focus was clearly Celtic.
Yeah, he said all along, look...
Well, 99% of his focus was Celtic. When he got back home, he was probably texting his agent.
98%, 1% on the press, what he was going to say to the press
and
afterwards.
1% on his agent. WhatsApps from his agent going, you got that fucking Spurs deal tied up yet?
Yeah,
Mrs. wants a new car.
What does it take?
Ferraris.
All he's got to be doing is saying, look, I'm concentrating in the game. As soon as he takes away from that, then the focus goes from that. But all it has to be is, look, a phone call or a message. Spurs are interested. Do you want me to speak to them? Yes.
Yeah.
Never ask me that again. I would sack an agent for asking that question.
So it's been going on in the background, but again, I don't really have a problem for that. He left Yokohama to come to us. It wasn't as if we were going, oh, do you know what? Maybe if this guy's coming to us, then we let him see out the season. We need this guy in as soon as possible to get us sorted. It'll be the same at Spurs. They need him in as soon as possible to appease their fans. So,
I mean, how long have they been waiting for 100 days? Over 100 days?
Is it? Yeah.
Since March or something?
Oh, well, they had that disastrous interim as well. They had to sack.
He sacked him. Yeah. So, look, Spurs are in a mess. They want him in as quickly as possible. And to be honest, it suits Celtic getting him leaving as soon as possible, because it means that there's no weeks on weeks of this, will he, won't he? He's gone, and now
the summer of how.
Yep.
Yeah.
Eddie, so it's now about who we go and get instead. And look, I'm the same as Stephen. I'm bitterly disappointed because I was all in on the guy. I loved everything about him. As I've said before, he taught me a lot about football. He taught me a lot about life. He was just brilliant. He embodied everything I want in a Celtic manager. But unfortunately, it's football these days. Guys move on. He might, as I've said before, I was at the coaching convention and he was talking about the Champions League next year, doing this, doing that. I don't think he ever was set on leaving Celtic, but opportunities arise in football, and for a guy at 57 for a job at Spurs to come up, a guy at 57 who's from Australia, who's never really been in Europe before until this stint, it's going to be very difficult for him to turn that down. Understand why he's went. Doesn't mean I'm disappointed. It doesn't mean I don't understand why people are disappointed, why people feel, oh, I should have stayed for another season. But another season comes with challenges where something might come up that doesn't go his way, and then maybe we want him out. Maybe it's time for, you only get really 3 years as a manager, but it's the same.
I appreciate what you're saying, but you can't criticise people for what. I mean, all of us would want Ange to stay for another season.
I'm not criticising it. You're entitled to feel how you want. Me personally, gutted, but understand why he's done it. And I think with football, with players we've seen recently, don't get these 3, 4, 5 years with certain players or managers. And I think management's becoming the same. You see it down in England, and that's sort of the benchmark for everything. Teams, apart from the sort of turbo elite, they can't keep managers very long because you become the next best thing and people want it. So I think it's Celtic just need to have that continuity now to bring in another good manager and keep this rolling, because as we're saying, this is all set for Celtic to be keep this dominance going if they get the right appointment here.
I think that's the question for me, Stephen, about the continuity. I think maybe what's happened here is that, and I'm including myself in this, I think maybe football has entered a new reality that's just maybe catching up with Scottish football insofar as if Celtic get a good player, we used to be able to keep them for 3 or 4 years, right? It used to then be 3 years, now it's 2. You know, if you've got a right good player, turning them over in 2 years. But that benefits Celtic because we're buying low, we're usually selling high. That's what's happening with Celtic. We're usually bringing in somebody for, don't know, 5 million quid, selling them for 15 million quid after 2 years. That allows us to go buy another 5 million quid player. And that works, that's fine. What I think the new reality we might be looking at is now, might not be obviously the case, but now you get a good manager in right away. Everyone's looking for a new manager. They're going, there's this guy at Celtic, Ange. We took it, and especially if Ange does well at Spurs, that busts this myth, because there's probably a thought down south. A few clubs will be looking at this move with interest, going, right, we've always kind of been quite sceptical about how good a manager is that does well in Scotland. Let's see if this Ange guy can do it. And if Ange produces it, then right away, Celtic managers can become the next hot ticket. But the problem Celtic have got is twofold. One, you don't buy a manager for 3 million quid and sell him for 15 million quid a lot of the time, unless you give him a long deal, which is risky in itself.
Yes.
And two, how does Celtic build anything losing their manager every couple of years? It is a really, really difficult thing to do. If you've got a good manager and it goes after 2 years and then you just keep overhauling. You can't do that. Summer's coming. Are you ready to unveil your beach bod? Manscaped is here to ensure your body is ready for the wild with their game-changing full-body grooming and hygiene products. Don't be the guy at the beach with the Austin Powers chest hair, or it doesn't even have to be that, Stevie. You know, that patchy way, sort of pasty, bit of hair on the shoulders. You don't want that either. If you grew some winter man tits, right, Melly, the least you can do is make sure they're hairless. It's time to get ready for hot guy summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with our code TIMS, TIMS.
Manscaped is dedicated to helping you increase your confidence and level up your full body grooming game with the Performance Package 4.0. The kit comes with the essential Lawnmower 4.0 waterproof cordless body trimmer and a ton of other liquid formulations to round out your grooming routine. Whether you're trimming your chest or the treasure chest in your pants, this is the best trimmer on the market. You also get 2 free gifts: the Shed Travel Bag, $39 value add, and the patented high-performance reduce-chafing Manscaped Boxers.
Get 20% off all of this and free shipping with the code TIMS, TIMS, at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS at manscaped.com. Trim your chesticles, the besticles.
I'm trying to look at it from the benefits of Celtic here as well. And look, Celtic have brought in a manager from relative obscurity and he's off to Spurs. We've had Brendan Rodgers who's went to Leicester. These are 2 massive jobs in England where guys come to Scotland for 2.5 years and get huge jobs. It's the same with the player trade model, and I think, like I said earlier, things are starting to change. Would I rather bring in now a manager who says, look, I'll give you 4 years and I guarantee that, but that's not going to guarantee success? Or do I want somebody who's brilliant for 2 years and moves on? You want the successful guys because...
Look, but I think that's a risk, mate.
But what's the risk then? Appointing Neil Lennon? What the other option is here, isn't it? Going for somebody who you think, do you know what, he'll stick with us rather than somebody that will leave. I'd rather somebody that comes in who can be successful. Celtic are now in a very good position where they can say, look, we can sell players on for good profit and we can get managers massive moves. And I think we're looking at Spurs and the way things are going now. Football's changed. It's not about looking at Celtic and going, that guy won, like Brendan Rodgers, nine trophies in a row or whatever it was, and going, oh, he must be good. They look at the whole package like they did when Ange came in by himself, created a culture at Celtic, brought together the fans and all that. That's exactly what Spurs need. He plays a great style of football. So Celtic can go out and get somebody that does that. De Zerbi's done it at Brighton. There's managers out there who play good football and can be successful in Scotland. So Celtic have got something really good here. I hope they go out and make a really good appointment.
I think the difference is, though, with Celtic, and you can say how things you want things to be and all, and how they should be, but there's a reality, and the reality of the thing is Celtic and Celtic fans, we like tradition, we like history, we like being a big club, we like being an old club, we like getting behind managers. But if you're saying to people the future for Celtic is a manager comes and leaves every 2 years and every player leaves every 2 years, that's a very difficult thing to sell to fans. And I don't know if I like it, and I think that's all right not to like it.
Facts don't care about your feelings. Is that the way we're going with this?
No, but I think there's an alternative where you need to find some sort of continuity for people to get behind. I don't know. It's a toss-up. I mean, if you're telling me we're going to get Ange, and if you're telling me take the last 2 years of Ange, and that's going to just replicate every 2 years, a double, a treble, new manager, treble, new manager.
That's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, but I like it, but also like this thing where you get a manager and he comes in and he does 3-4 years. He does something, he builds a bit of a legacy,
Celtic haven't had that in the last 10 years.
No, I know.
That kind of goes back to what I said earlier about this impossible standard that we like to apply. I know that we believe in this romantic notion that that's going to happen, and I totally appreciate that that's what the fans like and like to believe is what's going to come eventually if we just keep at this. But there's no real evidence in the last, 20 years that continuity or consistency even works or is even a positive thing. Who was the last manager who stayed more than 2.5 years or so and it ended
Brendan
well
Rodgers
for
is
them?
the longest serving manager for the last decade.
Yeah, I don't. All the examples I used earlier, people will say Martin O'Neill, but Martin O'Neill ended badly. He did wonderful things at Celtic, right? But it ended badly. One of his last games was one of the biggest disasters for us in recent memory. He left an ageing squad that needed gutted, been paid far too much. That wasn't a good way to leave Celtic. Gordon Strachan's last season after 4 years was terrible. So really, again, I'm not saying this to do these guys down. Those guys achieved great things with Celtic, but there's nothing to me that suggests that going past the 2, 3, 4 year mark even guarantees any kind of success at all.
Maybe it's not just down to the manager then, but it's definitely down to the club, because I don't know, right? I don't watch an awful lot of European football. I don't watch an awful lot of English football. But if you can give me an example of a club that changes its key players and manager every 2 years and is successful doing that,
I can.
Give me one.
The most successful club in England in the last 10, 12 years is Chelsea. People focus rightly so on Man City these days. It's not applicable because I'm not suggesting for a single second Celtic go out and do a Chelsea, right? But in the last 10, 12 years or so, Chelsea have won 2 Champions Leagues, 2 Europa Leagues, 3 titles, 4 FA Cups or something like that, and they change what they're doing every 2 minutes. But ditch managers left and right. Again, that's an extreme example.
Yeah, and I think the key there is an extreme example because they are one of the very few clubs with an unlimited money glitch, and they can afford to just bin whatever they're doing and buy in. Oh, we didn't like that last batch of the 5 best players in the world that we bought last summer. Let us buy the current 5 best players in the world. I just think, you're right, I have to acknowledge it. A lot
of dick advocating going on.
Yeah, well, no, you're right, because I did ask for an example, and I didn't know Chelsea did that, but you're right, and you're saying, well, Chelsea have done it, and that's fine. But I think Celtic would struggle to replicate that just for the reasons I gave. Yeah. And I think Celtic as a club will struggle if this is the new way forward. There's nothing to suggest that might be. Ange might just be, because I do think, to contradict myself slightly, I think the way Ange got this job, there's an element of the stars aligned. A couple of targets turned Spurs down. Yeah. Ange has got connections in there already. I think the stars aligned for Spurs and Ange here to end up getting this job. So I'm no panic merchant. I'm looking at the future saying we're going to rip up the squad every 2 years. However, there is an element of me thinking, If Celtic repeat the Ange trick, how can we possibly expect to hold on to a good manager? If Celtic repeat the good player trick, Are we just going to have to sort of hunker in for a lot of change a lot of the time?
I think so. I think that's the way football is. I think the Premier League's a wee bit different because look, the money there's wild, but different teams usually can win it, although Man City have won it a lot recently. But if you look, Bayern Munich have changed their manager a lot recently and have still won the league. Winning the league for them in the last day wasn't good enough, so they get rid of the manager who they already brought in this season. So if Celtic can uphold their standards, like Celtic standards are winning the league, there's only going to be one or two teams that win this league, and if Celtic have good standards and bring in a good manager, they should win this league more often than not. You're never going to have the monopoly on the league because anomalies can happen, like the COVID season. Probably won't happen again, but at some point you are going to lose a league. It's happened throughout my lifetime that Celtic have lost leagues, but they've always bounced back. Celtic right now are in a very good position. What they should and have to do is go out and get the best manager possible and plan for when that goes away. It's not about getting a manager in and saying, right, he's got a 4-year contract, or hopefully he's going to be here for 4 years. A successful manager will move on after 2 or 3, like successful players are, but that's been the way of the land for however long now. It's just the way football works, unfortunately. We do grow attached to people, but sometimes with Brendan Rodgers, you have that. It's easier to hate somebody and get over it, whereas with Ange, it's a wee bit more difficult because it hurts that much more.
Obviously, there's a lot happening with Celtic this summer. That doesn't need said. New managers, new players, Ange going, and it's all going to be on patreon.com/20minutetims. What better way to support fan-led content than what we're doing here at 20 Minute Tims? You can do that at patreon.com/20minutetims for extra podcasts, extra videos, extra writing. Stephen, continuity is basically what we're after here. I think that's the key, isn't it? Getting someone who can build upon what Ange has done. One of the things that we've got in place at the moment is a very strong squad.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of those players that Ange identified. I'm thinking particularly the sort of Kyogos of the world. I was going to say the Kyogos and the Furahashis. The Awatas of the world.
Yeah.
They came in. You would think that there's questions over whether or not those guys are going to maybe want to stay, because they are unique insofar as they were kind of cherry-picked by Ange. They didn't come to Celtic because it's Celtic and because they're in Scotland and they held a long dream to come and play for Celtic. You think that Ange, and he said as much, knew these players, had contacts in Japan, went and got them, and he's moved on. And I know football players are used to this sort of thing. This is what happens, but also what happens quite a lot of football is the manager that brought me to the club is gone. And that was good enough reason for me to leave. That's something the next manager's going to have to contend with, isn't it?
Yeah.
The squad, how it is. And I suppose there's another point to bring up is there anyone in this team you look at and think Ange might come back for him?
Maybe. I think the main players that Celtic have got are all in circumstances just now where I don't think they would be immediately appealing to a team like Spurs. Kyogo is going to be 29 halfway through next season. Now, that's not old, but is it really going to be a main target for a club like that? Don't think so. Callum McGregor, I think the ship has sailed probably. Cameron Carter-Vickers has been at Spurs a lot. Does he go back there? Don't really necessarily see it. Jota, maybe. I'm not really worried about that
Hatate?
just yet. Hatate's a good shout because I think he is destined to move at some point. He's an extremely good player, and that's always the fear. When it comes to... I do understand this as well, because people are now looking at the squad that Ange built, the house that Ange built, and see the crumbling foundations and worrying now that all the players are just going to jump ship. But this is just one of those quite special cases where the recruitment has been so unique to Celtic in the last couple of years. Different markets, East Asian players all coming in droves. So, half a dozen Japanese players, South Korean players, Australian players, they all come in. So it looks very Ange. But what I would say is it's not really any different to any other situation. The first job Ange has got at Spurs is going into a dressing room and convincing all those guys that he didn't sign, that he's not bullshit and he's worth staying for. So the guy who comes in to replace Ange has the same task. That's the first protocol. If we bring in, I don't know, we could probably throw a few of the names around at some point, and we're going to have a summer of that. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's all tied up in the next couple of days. But I actually quite enjoy a couple of weeks of wild speculation. But if, I don't know, Jesse Marsh comes into Celtic, his first job is convincing all of Ange's players that he's a guy worth sticking around for. So I'm not concerned about it just yet. I don't think Ange's first priority will be to come back to Celtic and raid for all the players, because it's a huge step up to England. I know people don't really like admitting that, but it is, and I don't know if I see any Celtic players currently being ready for that, or they're maybe just like slightly aged past it, like Callum McGregor and Kyogo.
Yeah, I think the players will be all right, to be honest. I think it is a wee bit unique in there's so many Asian players in there, but this happens all the time in football. This will be what Callum McGregor's 5th manager at Celtic, and he's not even done 10 years. So there is a changeover all the time in football. I think Celtic have got a good squad. All the players are sort of contracted up fairly well, so there will be a slight churn. But I think the new guy coming into a very good job, a very good squad. Maybe there'll be some players, but like Ange didn't really take MD when he first left Yokohama to Celtic until Dyson came in 6 months later. I presume he'll do that again. So I'm looking forward to it now, because now that he's definitely going, we haven't got that, will he, won't he? It's down to Celtic now to go out and do what they do. So I think the players as well, it reinvigorates them as well. I don't think we're going to bring in a manager who's going to completely tear up what Ange does and go, right, we're going long ball of that. We'll bring in a manager, hopefully, that plays a similar style. There will be a slight tweaks, because Ange's, it's not unique, but the fullback thing is coming in a lot in managers now. So I think Celtic will bring in a similar manager, and the players will be able to adapt to it, I'm sure.
I'm going to push back on that, because everything that we're putting forward here, right? You guys say, no, it could be fine. Ange will come, we'll get a manager to play summer football, and the players will be fine, and nobody want to leave. But there's no way that there's not going to be some sort of upheaval here for managers. And I don't think you can sit there, with all due respect, Martin Melly, and just surmise that the players won't want to go, and the next manager come in and he'll play the same way, and everything's going to be rosy in the garden, and this is how things are won. There is nothing more crucial to a club's success, and there's nothing more risky to a club's success than a manager leaving. We've seen that with Celtic in the past. Managers leaving, Ange with Neil Lennon version 2, we know what happened there. Ronnie Dyler, Tony Mowbray. In fact, it's managers leaving is really, really critical. This is a critical period in Celtic, and I think to brush over it and think, this success will just continue because the players won't want to go and the next manager will play the same. I think there's a high degree of risk here. We've had a very, very successful manager, and there's a degree of risk now involved. And I don't think it's true to say that, Kyogo won't want to leave because Callum McGregor's seen 5 managers. These guys are very, very specific. The way they work, their methods, their training methods, the environment that these guys work in. We know it's a completely different culture, and Ange was able to foster a working environment and working culture that suited these specific guys from the J-League, and they've been outstanding for us. It's not an easy thing to do. Not every club in the world goes out and just plucks guys for the J-League and they automatically slot right in at that culture. So I think that there needs to be a recognition that there is an element of risk here. And that could Celtic go out and get a manager that can facilitate a similar culture? Probably. You mentioned Jesse Marsh. Doesn't he set, my head are alight? But that sort of guy who's worked across different leagues, across different cultures, America, Austria, Germany, England. That guy would give me more confidence. A guy that's worked across a lot of cultures, where he's probably worked with lots of different players from lots of different backgrounds. He knows how to foster these environments. That would give me more than a guy who's only worked in Britain, for example, because I'm at a position here where I want to keep Kyogo. Yeah. I don't want the writing to be on the wall because Ange's gone, that means Kyogo goes. I want to keep Hatate. I don't want the writing to be on the wall just because he's gone. There's 2 guys who signed in January who've hardly played for Celtic. Yeah, that Ange brought over.
There's another element to this that maybe these players, we will, if those players go, we will then focus on the fact that Ange left, then prompting them to go, but they might have been due to go anyway. We are reaching the point where some of these players have been here for 2 full seasons, and at that point it is probably time to either sign a new contract or look to sell while they're still at their peak value. That's going to happen anyway, regardless of who comes in and who leaves. It might have been the case that Ange would have agreed to sell some of these guys on anyway, but the principal point you're making is still true, in that the manager who comes in might not want the same level of play, or might not look to attract the same level of players. Of course there's risk, but I think the business has to roll on, to be honest. I think the approach has to stay the same, because whatever Ange had introduced as the word you've used, a culture, it was working and it was starting to kick into full gear. I think we probably need to just stick to that and not keep players.
Who's responsible for that though? If Ange goes, John Kennedy, you wouldn't expect him to stick around unless he's getting the job. I don't see John Kennedy. There was a brilliant piece today in the Record about explaining what a brilliant job John Kennedy's done, and to me that kind of looked like John Kennedy's pitch for the Celtic job. To me, that's I sort of read between the lines there. There was rumours that he's going to go to Spurs with Ange. It's not something Ange does. Again, is that John Kennedy's camp trying to put pressure on Celtic to make a decision? So, would any of you be happy with John Kennedy as manager?
I don't have the same reaction to John Kennedy as other people do. I think other people still carry around the baggage of the COVID season when it comes to John Kennedy. Now, I don't blame people for that because that is a stain that's hard to shift, to be honest, him having been involved in that. But that doesn't outweigh the clear good he has done under several managers now. He's obviously doing something right. The suggestion that he's just been kept around as some sort of sympathy vote because he once got injured nearly 20 years ago is absurd to me. He's obviously doing something right. Every manager that has worked with him rates him extremely highly. But at the end of that, I am left thinking that the ship has, again, a phrase I've used, the ship has probably sailed on that. The time to do that, the time to lump all of the eggs in that basket was probably after Neil Lennon. That would have been right. This has been terrible. The end of this season has been terrible, even with John Kennedy in charge, but we're going to stick with it. Now, that means we don't get Ange, of course. I'm not advocating for that having happened back then, but that was the right time. And then that window closed, and now he's still an assistant manager. I think John Kennedy should go because he's probably at the point now where he needs a different challenge. He's been at the club a long, long time. I don't see him getting the top job now, so he probably needs to go and broaden his horizons a little bit.
So we're kind of in agreement. I didn't ask you, Mealy, but I'd only asked you to illustrate the further point that I'm making is, so John Kennedy will probably go. It's either he gets the manager's job or he goes. I don't see him sticking around. Ange is gone. Cybergav, who knows if he's going to stick around. The point is, there's no one responsible for carrying that culture on.
Are we set for another summer of director of football chat again? Because has that can been kicked down the road to after Ange now?
I think that's we either do that or we do what Mealy was talking about. We just refresh every 2 years, and if the ultimate goal is success, then who really cares how you get it?
Well, I realise I'm talking a lot. Sorry, but it's a podcast after all. But I'm just bursting with ideas here. The idea of a director of football is that you can have both. You can sort of have your cake and eat it with that. You can have continuity in that it's still the same overriding philosophy at the heart of the club, but underneath that is a lack of consistency. So it's just plug in and plug out coaches underneath that. So that's should be the sort of ideal scenario for a club like Celtic. But we did focus on that after Lennon had to go, and we thought that was the answer. But Ange came in and changed all that and convinced us all that it's not what's needed. It's just this one figurehead running absolutely everything. But has anything changed now, today, with Ange going from that dark day a couple of years ago where we thought we needed one? Probably not. It's really just been Ange's come in and gone and left us in much the same situation, albeit in a much, much stronger position, both playing, financially, everything else. All of those things are different, but the structure of the club might not be.
I think to sort of slightly disagree with Stephen. There's a lot of disagreement on this podcast this afternoon, or this morning, depending on when you listen to it. But could now be, no, I'm not advocating for this personally, right? But it could be argued, Melly, that the perfect time to give John Kennedy the job is now, because the chance of failure is much less, because everything is there that the guy needs to succeed. Now, if John Kennedy goes on to become if John Kennedy, for example, was in a similar situation in England or whatever, and he'd worked at a massive club for a long time under several top managers and succeeded under all these managers, you would look at him and go, he's actually got the makings of a good manager there. I heard something recently that Jose Mourinho said about Xabi Alonso, and he was like, look, I think Xabi Alonso has got the makings of a good manager because he played under X, played under Y, played under Z, the position he played in the pitch, he's been in the game a long time. He goes, if there's someone to watch, I think they're going to make a good manager. And you would look at Kennedy and go, he's been at Celtic a long time. He's worked almost at every level of Celtic. Yeah. He's worked under countless managers now. He was assistant. What was the assistant to Brendan? No, first team coach.
Then assistant with Lennon.
Assistant with Lennon, and then assistant with Ange Postecoglou. think if there's ever a chance, if there's ever an opportunity to give Kennedy the manager's job now, I'd just see what he's made of.
Xabi Alonso was my shout before Ange came in as
that's
well.
right, yeah.
Yeah, for Kennedy, I think it's now or never. But Ange is always going himself to these jobs. But if he takes John Kennedy, I can understand why, because it will have a bit of continuity for him. But for John Kennedy, I'd love him to stay around. But again, it's Celtic were in that sort of unique position where we've had John Kennedy throughout all these managers, but not a lot of other clubs do that a lot of the time. And with John Kennedy, he has done really well. Look, I've seen him doing the training. It's John Kennedy that does the training on the Ange is obviously overseeing it, but Ange will come in on the Friday maybe and take it. So John Kennedy does all the training. He knows all the players. Celtic could be here, and I can understand. I don't want John Kennedy to get the job, but I could understand why, because it's only Ange that's been taken out. If Celtic keep John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan, don't know what will happen with Harry Kewell, but all the staff are still the same. Not a lot's changed, but the manager's the pinnacle of all. He's the one that's the players feed off. He's the one that gives them that motivation. I think he's the driving force behind it all. John Kennedy's a great coach. If he wants to stick around, I'd love that. I just don't see him being manager. And look, when new managers or head coaches come in, they like bringing in their own staff. It's very unusual for Celtic to get a situation like Ange. So, look, if John Kennedy goes, maybe, but look at Eddie Howe wanted all his staff in. Would John Kennedy have stuck around, or would John Kennedy have been part of that? I don't know. So it's going to be very interesting to see with Kennedy what he does, if he goes with Ange, if he stays, who comes in, what the dynamic is, because he probably does think, look, well, I don't know what he thinks, but maybe he's happy being an assistant or a coach, because he does a very good job. He's highly thought of whenever you hear interviews. This thinking that he's just stuck around is nonsense, because it's fact that good managers have kept him about, good managers wanted him there, players all speak highly of him. So I don't know what the future holds for him either. It's going to be very interesting to see. And look, the reason I said Celtic are in a good position is because it might only be Ange and maybe Harry Kewell that leave. Everything else is still in place that was made Celtic successful. We just need a new figurehead in there, and I know there's huge risk in that. We could get the appointment wrong.
So how much of this, if you had to put a percentage on the existing situation at Celtic versus Ange's input, what led to Celtic's success? How would you weight that? Would it be 50-50? Would it be 40% Ange, 60% the stuff that you spoke about's already there?
Well, 70-30 probably. I think Ange's...
Is that in Ange's favour?
Yeah, I think Ange's brilliant.
So we've taken out 70% of what made Celtic a success, and what's left is only 30% of what made Celtic a success. Yeah, so that's the risk there.
That's a huge risk, but I mean that 70% because he's so good now, but this is Scottish football. Neil Lennon's won trophies. Michael Beale is looking like a decent manager. It's not going to take a massive, brilliant manager to win trophies in Scotland. Ange Postecoglou sort of bucked the trend for me in that I was completely bought into everything. Celtic went out after Martin O'Neill and got Gordon Strachan. Wasn't as good as a manager, was never going to be my personal favourite, but you could argue he was more successful than Martin O'Neill getting through the last 16 of the Champions League. So it might be a different manager. He might not feel to me as good as Ange Postecoglou, but they could still do a very good job and make Celtic champions again.
Obviously, the big question is going to be who's the next Celtic manager.
Yes.
How far Celtic are down that process? Who knows? I mean, we don't know how far down, how long this has been going on with Ange. We're in the extraordinary situation, really, where all this news of Ange was breaking through the English press. The Scottish press had none
nowhere
of it.
Near it. Yeah, nowhere
near it. And you're like, that's obviously, they obviously didn't not know. It wasn't happening in secret, but obviously Celtic were saying absolutely nothing, and Spurs were quite happy to yap to absolutely everybody. That guy with the Athletic, was it the game?
Ornstein?
David Ornstein, who seems to have a direct line to Daniel Levy, which is probably the case.
Yeah.
Was getting all the scoops. So obviously, there's nothing leaked from Celtic at all, which means there's nothing about who Celtic's next potential manager might be. People are just out there clutching at straws. So we might as well run through some of the names as we sit here today. Now, Brendan Rodgers, early favourite. Just before we sat down to record, there's stories in The Sun. Exclusive, Brendan Rodgers rules himself out of the Celtic job.
Right, yeah.
Right, so
I couldn't imagine it for a single second.
I probably could. I could have.
It would probably be great, but with all the baggage that comes with it, I just couldn't actually picture it.
There'd be some making up there to do.
Yeah.
I think I'm quite relaxed about the next Celtic manager position, because the recruitment of managers has actually been okay recently. It was Brendan Rodgers, great shout. He left in the middle of the night. Neil Lennon came. That was a bit of a special situation, but Neil Lennon did win the league,
Yeah, he did,
win the treble, did all right against Lazio and a few results in Europe, a few honkers as well, absolutely horrendous results in Europe, and ended up just exploding the way that things often do with Neil Lennon. So he went. But before that, it was Ronnie Deila. He wasn't an exceptional Celtic manager, but you could kind of see what they were trying to do. They were trying to do the thing where you go and get the young up-and-coming European coach. Then it was Ange, but before Ange, it was nearly Eddie Howe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you said that, because they're clearly, with what has now happened with Eddie Howe, he has taken Newcastle into the Champions League. So Celtic had definitely had the right idea there. I know Newcastle are now one of those clubs with unlimited resources, but that's not the case now. I mean, you look at their team and they've got guys like Dan Burn and Willock and all that in their team, and he's taking them into the Champions League for the first time in nearly 20 years. So Celtic were on the right track there.
They were, and I think that's out of the question that Celtic's manager is not what you would call an elite coach. Now, Ange Postecoglou was an relatively unknown quantity on these shores, but there's no argument that the way he works, the way he operates, his methods and the skill, he's an elite level coach. There's no argument about that, and I think that's what Celtic's next manager needs to be, Melly. So the names that were linked: David Moyes, Enzo Maresca, Brendan Rodgers have already discussed, Jesse Marsh.
It's just dusted off from a couple of years ago. There's nothing new. Yeah.
Well, that's it. And I think, do any of these guys get you excited, Melly? And you know, would you go back to the likes of Jesse Marsh, who we obviously put tentative chat out to before?
He's a bit tainted with the Leeds thing recently, but that doesn't mean he's a bad manager. Not quite the one for me. I think what we can find is somebody that plays the same sort of style as Ange, and I think there's plenty of managers out there. I couldn't name you them all, but
Graham Potter's another one, which I think that ship sailed personally.
I think Graham Potter would be my number one out the guys out there, but I think Celtic, while we were saying that the club are a mess, they're a riot, Eddie Howe's not coming, behind the scenes they were working, getting Ange Postecoglou in. So hopefully they have had the foresight and they have done what they've done before and have got targets lined up. The connections with the City group might be beneficial again in seeing guys like that, because everybody wants the next Pep Guardiola. So that's what Celtic should be aiming for, trying to find that guy who's going to be that. Whether it's Maresca, I'm not so sure. I would have taken Brendan Rodgers back, but completely understand why people wouldn't. So we'll need to see how it spans out now. I just don't know.
Any of those names that have been linked so far, Stephen, tickle your pickle?
Do you think it'll be any of them? I feel like it won't be.
No, probably not. To me, that just feels like the old playbook being dusted off.
If it was any of them, it's going to be Marsh or Rodgers, and Rodgers already ruled himself out.
Yeah, Marsh seems to kind of make sense. That kind of leads me on to something I'll probably talk about in a wee minute about expectations. Something you mentioned earlier, Jamie, about expectations versus the reality of football and how they don't quite match up anymore. But Marsh would probably make sense. I think for a couple of seasons, the football would be absolutely wild. He's a big character and all that as well. Seems to fit the bill. Enzo Maresca is now Pep Guardiola's assistant at Man City, so he's obviously not a mug. I know it didn't work out at Parma, but what both of those guys have in common, and something you've mentioned, Melly, there, is about the Leeds thing. The expectations and reality. The ideal candidate just does not exist. No. The perfect candidate doesn't exist. One, a guy who hasn't failed anywhere, not going to get him. It's not going to get him because he doesn't exist, right?
No.
Two, a guy who is good enough to progress Celtic in Europe, right, but is going to stay in Scotland for ages, doesn't exist. That's not going to happen.
I think it's important to say, you're right, Steve. I think it's important to say, if someone got Celtic to a European Championship, a European final, under normal circumstances, obviously it doesn't happen at Rangers, right? But if someone got Celtic out of the Champions League, out at the Europa League final, won it or running up, they would be next year's hot topic. They would be next season's hot property.
And regardless of those things that may or may not happen, we can't bring in a top coach, a guy who we think fits the bill and ticks every box, and expect him to stay long term. That just won't happen anymore. No top level coach is going to come to Scotland for any longer than 2 or 3 years. So we either need to get used to that, or we need to get a guy who's not on the radar of any English team ever again.
Well, that's the only way you do that is if you give John Kenny the job and he turns into a top coach. Then there's an element of he owes the club something. You've pushed them through. You've got them to this stage.
Yeah.
You've nurtured them. I've nurtured you as a prospect the same way that we've seen with Callum McGregor, and they've got a loyalty to the club. You're right, but I think it's now unrealistic. As much as it annoys me, you might get the occasional manager who really strikes it off with Celtic. But if we take Maresca, right, for talking's sake, who has no allegiances to Celtic whatsoever, give him the Celtic manager's job. He does brilliantly, and then in 2 years, Man City want him back, just for pure hypothetical notes, are almost unrealistic. I don't think now, after what's happened with Ange, we've got any right to say, "Boo! That's not the way you're supposed to do things with Celtic," because we know now. That's just the reality of the football landscape that we've got.
And Ange didn't have any affiliation to Celtic, really, did he? He came in here like it was another job, done brilliantly, took to the fans, said everything right. I think he was genuine, but football manager, this is a big opportunity for him.
I know, and I think part of the thing that lets people down, and I think part of the harsh reality you just need to accept, is that just because football managers do these things which are designed, they are designed to endear them with the fans, it doesn't necessarily mean that their career loyalties are tied in. There's a bit of cynicism about it, and I think that goes for all these players just now as well. Players like, I'm looking at Jota, who's very active in social media, posing in old Celtic strips, going to Celtic bars and all that. No offence to the guy, I'm sure he does enjoy it here, but underneath all that, there's a ruthless footballer who's looking for his next move, and I especially think with Celtic, there's a lot of plucking on the heartstrings. It's just part of the Celtic brand. A lot of clubs have got that. That's what ties people to football clubs. That's what I love about the club. It's more than just a business. It's more than just tick here, sign here, the manager, here's my season ticket money.
It's a strength for Celtic as well as bringing these players in, they get it, and then they go on.
So the flip side of that is you're going to be pissed off, you're going to be emotional, you're going to be disappointed when people that you've emotionally invested in leave. And I just think as Celtic fans do, that's just the reality we have to accept.
What's the alternative though? Do you want people to just be totally cold on the off chance that they leave 2 years from now? All this,
they run that risk, mate. You do, if that's the new reality, if fans start to think a manager's going to leave in 18 months or 2 seasons, there is a risk where the fans might start, why am I investing in this guy? If I get behind this guy, he's gone in 2 years.
What's the alternative?
I don't, there isn't one that people again
turn into a tourist league. That's the alternative.
Well, what do we do to stop that? You know what I mean? It's like we're fighting against the tide here at all times. To me, I think you're asking too much to expect Ange Postecoglou to come in here, do everything he's done, but stay completely disengaged from the fans, never say anything nice about his job, never say that he's happy at the club, never.
They didn't want somebody who was
never engage with the fans and leave because he's about to leave.
Do you think there is a new future where a manager comes in and goes, I see this is the ideal stepping stone, give me 2 years?
People will be furious.
People will be furious. That's the joke. That was the joke.
Yeah. No, but that's what I mean. It's a very good point, and that's the alternative here. If people came in and said, look, don't ask me about Celtic, don't ask me about the fans, I'm here for my money and I'm going to go to the English Premier League in 2 years, that's not a viable alternative either. So I think, I mean, you can talk about this stuff on Twitter. I don't think that this is the right platform for it, but I don't like this sort of chucking the baby out with the bathwater that occurs when people leave the club. I don't think people know how to respond anymore, so we just go back to the recent experiences. Brendan Rodgers did this, so right, Ange leaves, so let's go back to all those details. Let's completely chuck everything he did in the bin. Let's pick holes in what he said. Oh, he's a liar. I think it makes for quite a poisonous experience, really, when it comes to players and or managers leaving. I'm grateful to Ange for what he did at the club. I didn't want him to leave, but I'm quite relaxed about it, to be honest. I appreciate it, and with everything we've said tonight, for all the reasons we've already spoken about, the sources that it was coming from, I made my peace with it. Right, I think that's what people need. No, I don't expect anyone. I'm not asking for anyone to stand and wave him off. Let's all chip in and buy him a watch and all that. Now he's going off the Spurs.
Carriage clock.
I don't expect anyone to be happy about it. But I kind of draw the line at just like undermining everything he's ever said. And like you said, it's like pointless going back over everything he said and picking holes in it and calling him a liar. I think it's quite damaging. It just feels a bit unnecessary and petty. So I don't like it when this happens to players from the past, sometimes it's their own fault, right? Chris Commons and Craig Burley, Charlie Nicholas, they did it to themselves, right? But I don't like it when people who come and contribute massively to this club leave the right way. Let's face it, he left the right way, left us on top, and that's it. So I don't like it when he's kind of undermined like that. Again, I don't expect anyone to be happy about it, but I'm grateful to Ange for everything he's achieved here. He came in, picked us up when we were in a terribly low ebb, changed the culture of the club as far as I can see, built the bridges that were, if not burned, on fire between the fans and the board and all that sort of stuff. We're never going to fully trust the board, but Ange repaired all that and got us back engaged with the club. He did that while giving us an amazing team to watch, great recruitment, great fit players to get behind. That all matters to me.
Yeah.
Right?
And in turn, we gave Ange a platform from which he could go and get a job in England.
Yeah, great, fine. But I'm talking about my experience of it. I think I'm happy that he came to the club and did all the things he did. He leaves. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, great, thanks, like enjoy Spurs and all that." I don't want him to go, but thank you for the memories, etc.
Yeah, I'm the same as Stephen. Look, he changed everything for me. The way I look at managers, the way at football, the way I look at football. I thought Celtic were going to be, and he changed a lot of my thinking as well. That you get to that when Rangers are 25 points ahead, and or Celtic are years behind Rangers. It's not. You get yourself a good manager. You get somebody that everybody can buy into and the players buy into, and you give him what he wants, and Celtic can be successful. So I loved pretty much every second of Ange's tenure here. I thought it was brilliant to watch. I thought the way he went out and stuck to his principles and thought, no, this is the way I'm going to play. Even when you were saying things like, oh, we need to find a way to win these games, I was on board with him. Because I think
not a competition.
I'm not having a go at you here, but he stuck to his principles. He stuck to what he believed in, and it taught me a lot. So I'll always be grateful for him. I think he's a brilliant manager for Celtic. I hope he goes on to Spurs and does well. Will he or won't he? It's going to be difficult for him. He might need to change something. So thanks for the memories, Gravy Guts.
I know he's out the door just as they get a good just as they get a good next. Look. I mean, obviously I like the guy and he's been a brilliant Celtic manager and all that. I think a lot of it was down to his personality that we took to him. There's been other managers that have come in and won trebles, and there's been other managers come in that have played great football, and there's other managers come in and done both. And, you're right, there's an element of all the stuff we've discussed in it. He didn't hang around long enough to fail, or you didn't hang around long enough to leave mid-season because... people are immediately saying, he's the best manager I've ever seen at Celtic, sort of disregarding how good Brendan Rodgers was as a Celtic manager, for example.
About how you feel in it. Dembele's still loved and he jumped out.
Well, that's it. And it's a lot of it's emotion, and that's one thing that is part of cult Postecoglou is the emotion that he brings. I'm indifferent about how he does at Spurs. I'm more concerned about how Celtic move on from this moment. Yes. I'm more concerned about how Celtic move on at this moment.
And from this point on, that's what the focus is. Yeah. We're just
we could start a Postecoglou. We could start just an Ange podcast and follow him as he goes down to Spurs. See how he gets on. Passing it on just like all those Marinos fans and the Sydney fans have done with us.
I don't want to lose them now. I know. That's the real quiz.
Kevin Muscat then, is that what we need to go do? Not a chance. Hey, and on that bombshell, we'll see you next week.